in a pencil gum, erasing what was never done. Stories in the trees to see, pounding all over me. Stories under our feet, hitching rides, street to street. Stories in the homes you see, jumping door to door, magically. Stories in our cigarettes that never seem to rest. Stories all around us, accumulating like dust. Stories that got no charm. Stories creating false alarms. Stories that need a lot of help. Stories with 1,000 arms. Stories that made the man. Stories that destroyed his land. Stories that floated away. Stories that made the day. Stories made in glory. Stories that made me worry. Stories of an evil creed, born in the bamboo reeds. Stories fighting to stay alive. Stories in your wife's eyes. Stories that wanna be wise. Stories that live as lies. Stories in disguise. Stories that monopolize. Stories that wake in your dreams. Stories that just ain't what they seem. Stories that ask for big fees. Stories created by enemies. Stories showing who's friendly.